The Midnight Emissary. The repair docks of Vanguard Station reeked of fuel and desperation. Trace Riggs wiped grimy hands on his coveralls, squinting at the mess of wires inside an ancient cargo hauler's navigation system. 36 years old with nothing but a toolbox and cynicism to show for it, he'd long accepted his fate among the forgotten machinery orbiting this backwater corner of space. "You're killing me, old girl," he muttered to the ship, yanking a corroded circuit board free. The clock on his wrist device blinked 23:47, another late shift, another night of instant noodles and synthetic whiskey in his cramped quarters. Just like yesterday. Just like tomorrow. The station's ambient hum changed pitch, dropping to a frequency that made Trace's teeth ache. He paused, head tilted, as status lights throughout the dock cycled from standard blue to deep violet. Not a power surge. Something else. Docking Bay 4 receiving unscheduled arrival, announced the station's automated voice, oddly distorted. Clearance codes, verified. Trace frowned. No ships were expected at this hour, especially not with clearance codes that could bypass standard protocols. Curiosity, his oldest weakness, pulled him from the innards of the cargo hauler toward the observation window overlooking Bay 4. The ship that materialized from the void defied conventional engineering. Silver-white alloys flowed like liquid mercury across its hull, absorbing and refracting starlight in patterns that confused the eye. No thrusters, no visible propulsion system, yet it moved with deliberate precision, settling onto the dock with eerie silence. "Veldari," Trace whispered, recognition and disbelief mingling in his voice. The Veldari were near mythical to most humans, an advanced species that had maintained cautious diplomatic relations after first contact decades ago. They rarely ventured beyond their territories, and never without official envoys and announcements. Yet here one was, in the middle of nowhere, docking at a station whose greatest claim to fame was its substandard coffee. A seam appeared along the ship's side, widening into an aperture that released a shimmer of pale blue atmosphere. Through this haze stepped a figure whose presence seemed to command the very air around her. Tall and willowy, she moved with fluid grace that made human movement seem clumsy by comparison. Her skin held a faint luminescence, like moonlight trapped beneath alabaster. Delicate ridges framed features that were almost human yet distinctly alien, high cheekbones, eyes slightly too large with irises that shifted color like opals. Silver markings traced their way from her temples into hair that floated as if underwater, defying gravity. But it was the set of her shoulders that caught Trace's attention, a familiar military bearing that stirred something in his memory. She didn't look around. Didn't hesitate. With unerring purpose, she walked directly toward the maintenance corridor where Trace stood watching. Staff and security drones scattered from her path, equally awed and unnerved. Trace considered retreating to the relative safety of his broken ship but found himself rooted in place. The Veldari woman's eyes locked with his through the observation glass, and a jolt of recognition, impossible recognition, passed between them. The security door slid open with a reluctant whine. She stepped through, her presence filling the narrow corridor with an energy that prickled along Trace's skin. "Trace Riggs," she said, her voice carrying harmonics human vocal cords couldn't produce. Third-class mechanic, formerly of the Frontier Corps, discharged under circumstances listed as medical necessity in official records. Trace backed up a step, confusion slipping toward alarm. "You have me at a disadvantage." "I am Naira Velthorin," she replied. "Daughter of Commander Kelthorin of the Veldari Defense Command." The name struck Trace like a physical blow. Kelthorin, the commander whose tactical brilliance had stopped the Scourge invasion that threatened both human and Veldari space. A legend in both cultures, presumed dead after the final battle at Helios Gate 3 years ago. "My father spoke of you often," Naira continued, moving closer, her eyes studying him with unsettling intensity. "He said you were the only human he ever trusted completely." Trace barked out a laugh, sharp and hollow. "Lady, I think you've got the wrong mechanic. I've never met a Veldari in my life, let alone some high-ranking commander." "And yet," she said, Reaching slowly into a compartment in her fitted silver suit, "You recognized my ship's design immediately. You whispered 'Veldari' before I emerged. Curious knowledge for someone who has never encountered my kind." She withdrew a small device, activating it with a touch. A holographic image formed between them, two figures standing before a tactical display. One was unmistakably a Veldari officer in ceremonial armor. The other. "That's not me," Trace said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. The human in the image wore a uniform he'd never seen, bore decorations he'd never earned. But the face, older, more confident, but undeniably his. "This was taken 7 years ago, at the Council of Seven Worlds," Naira said. "You were my father's strategic advisor during the Scourge conflict. You helped design the final battle formation that saved both our species." Trace's head throbbed suddenly, sharp pain lancing behind his eyes. Fragmented images flashed through his mind, star maps, alien writing, the sensation of falling. "I've never left this sector," he insisted, pressing fingers to his temples. "I've been fixing ships on this station for 9 years. Have you?" Naira's voice softened. "Or is that what they wanted you to believe? Look at your hands, Trace Riggs." He glanced down reflexively. His hands were calloused, scarred from years of mechanical work. But along his left wrist, partially hidden by his watchband, was a thin silver line he'd always assumed was from an accident he couldn't quite remember. Naira stepped closer, her presence causing the air to vibrate subtly. "That's a neural interface scar. Military grade. They took your memories, Trace. They built this life for you, this identity. But they couldn't erase everything." The station lights flickered, bathing them in momentary darkness. When illumination returned, Naira's expression had changed from curious to urgent. "They've detected my presence," she said, glancing toward the ceiling. "We have limited time." She extended her hand, palm up. "My father's final message led me to you. He believed you held the key to preventing another war, one that would destroy both our peoples." "This is insane," Trace said, yet found himself staring at her outstretched hand. "Why would I believe any of this?" "Because deep down, you've always known something was wrong," she replied. "The dreams that wake you screaming, the knowledge you can't explain, the sensation that your life doesn't fit you properly. Haven't you ever wondered why a man with your technical aptitude is stuck fixing cargo haulers on a forgotten station?" The overhead comm system crackled. "Security alert. Unidentified presence detected in maintenance section 12. All personnel clear the area. Containment protocols engaged." Naira's eyes, now shimmering with urgency, never left his. "They're coming for both of us now. You can stay and let them erase what little they left of you, or you can come with me and find the truth." The station trembled as security barriers engaged. Trace felt the familiar weight of routine, of the life he knew, pulling him toward safety. But Naira's words had ignited something else, a spark of recognition, of purpose that felt more real than anything in his dampened existence. "What did your father say about me?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the wailing alarms. Naira's lips curved slightly. "That you were impossibly stubborn. That you never made the expected choice. That when everything else failed, your unpredictability was our greatest weapon." The security door at the corridor's end began to glow red as cutting tools attacked it from the other side. Whatever was coming through wasn't standard station security. "If I go with you," Trace said, decision crystallizing even as he spoke, "I want answers. Real ones. You'll have them," Naira promised. "Though you may not like what you discover." The door behind them exploded inward. In one fluid motion, Naira drew Trace toward her ship, a strange weapon materializing in her free hand. "Run now," she commanded. "Questions later." As they sprinted toward the Veldari vessel, Trace felt something shift inside him, muscle memory responding to a danger his conscious mind couldn't remember. His body moved with unexpected precision, anticipating Naira's movements as if they'd trained together for years. The ship's entrance expanded to receive them, sealing instantly behind them as dark armored figures poured into the bay. The interior pulsed with living light, consoles activating at Naira's approach. "They will try to prevent our departure," she said, settling into what appeared to be a control interface. "This may be uncomfortable." The ship hummed, a sound that resonated in Trace's bones. Through the translucent hull, he watched as the station's defense systems activated, weapon ports emerging from concealed compartments. "Who are they?" he managed to ask as the ship lifted free of its moorings. "Who would go to such lengths?" Naira's hands danced across controls that responded to her touch like extensions of her own body. "The same forces that erased your past and left you here to rust," she replied. "Those who fear what we discovered together." The station's weapons fired, energy bursts dissipating harmlessly against the Veldari ship's hull. In response, the vessel accelerated smoothly into the darkness of space, leaving Vanguard Station and the life Trace had known behind. "My father's last words to me," Naira said, turning to face him fully, "were that when I found you, I should tell you this: the Horizon Protocol was never deactivated." Something cold and certain settled in Trace's gut at those words: recognition without memory, fear without context. "And what exactly," he asked as stars streaked past them, "is the Horizon Protocol?" "That," Naira said grimly, "is what we need to remember before it's too late for both our worlds." Echoes of forgotten wars. The Veldari ship slipped through space like a ghost, leaving conventional physics struggling to keep up. Trace stood at a viewing port, watching distant stars blur into streaks of light. His reflection stared back, a man caught between identities, with questions burning holes through his certainty. "We've cleared pursuit range," Naira announced, her slender fingers withdrawing from the ship's neural interface console. "The vessel has activated stealth protocols. We should be undetectable to standard tracking systems." "Nice trick," Trace muttered, turning to face her. "Mind explaining how those security forces back there knew exactly when to show up? Or why they were willing to blow apart a civilian station to get to us?" Naira's luminescent skin dimmed slightly, what Trace was beginning to recognize as her species' equivalent of a grimace. They weren't station security. They were Sentinel operatives. "Sentinels," Trace repeated, the word triggering a flash of dark uniforms and faceless helmets in his mind. "Joint Human Veldari Intelligence Division." The words had left his mouth before he realized he shouldn't know them. Naira tilted her head, watching him closely. "Yes," she confirmed. "Created after the Scourge War to maintain peace between our species. At least, that was their official purpose." Trace pressed his palms against his temples, fighting the throbbing ache as fragmented memories tried to surface. "If I was really this advisor to your father, why erase my memory? Why dump me on a repair station?" "Because you knew too much," Naira said, moving to a compartment embedded in the wall. It responded to her touch, revealing a small chamber containing what looked like a metal cylinder. "You and my father discovered something about the Sentinels, about their true purpose. Something dangerous enough that they separated you both and erased all connection between you." She withdrew the cylinder, handling it with reverence. "This is my father's legacy cache. His memories, his knowledge, preserved in Veldari crystal lattice. His final message instructed me to find you before accessing it." "Why me?" Trace asked, wary but curious. "Because it's keyed to both of you. A security measure. It requires your neural pattern and his genetic signature, mine, as his daughter, to unlock." The ship dimmed its ambient lighting, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Naira placed the cylinder on a central console, where it hovered slightly above the surface. "I should warn you," she said, her voice softening. "If your memories were artificially suppressed, this may trigger their return. The process can be disorienting." Trace barked out a humorless laugh. "More disorienting than finding out my entire life might be fabricated. Let's get on with it." Naira nodded, then placed her palm against one end of the cylinder. She nodded toward the opposite end. "Your hand here." Trace hesitated only briefly before pressing his palm against the cool metal. Immediately, the cylinder illuminated from within, lines of energy coursing along its surface. "Genetic verification accepted," announced a disembodied voice that resonated with the same harmonics as Naira's. "Neural pattern analysis in progress." Pain exploded behind Trace's eyes, white-hot needles piercing through the constructed walls in his mind. He would have collapsed if not for Naira's sudden grip on his shoulder, steadying him. The cylinder projected a holographic display, expanding to fill the chamber. Within it appeared the figure of Commander Kelthoran, tall, distinguished, with the same luminescent quality as his daughter but bearing the marks of age and battle across his features. "If you're seeing this," the projection began, "then Naira has found you, Trace. And if my calculations are correct, they've already attempted to wipe your memory of everything we discovered." Trace stared, transfixed, as the pieces of his fractured past began aligning like constellations revealing their pattern. 3 years ago, Kelthoran's projection continued, "We uncovered evidence that the Scourge War was engineered, deliberately orchestrated to bring our species into conflict, then manipulated toward an alliance under Sentinel oversight." Images flashed through the hologram, battle plans, intercepted communications, surveillance footage showing shadowy meetings between human and Veldari officials. "The Horizon Protocol wasn't a defense strategy as we were told," Kelthoran said grimly. "It was a long-term plan to merge our technological capabilities under unified control. The Sentinels were never meant to be peacekeepers, they're the first stage of something far more sinister." Another memory surfaced in Trace's mind, a hidden facility, rows of suspension chambers containing hybrid forms, neither fully human nor Veldari. "They're building an army," Trace whispered, the words emerging unbidden. "Using genetic material from both species." Naira's eyes widened. "You remember." "Fragments," Trace admitted, wincing as more images cascaded through his consciousness. "Your father and I found their primary research base. We were going to expose them to both governments, but you were betrayed," Kelthoran's hologram continued, as if anticipating the conversation. "By Director Halstead, the human you trusted most." The name hit Trace like a physical blow. Director Lane Halstead, his mentor, the woman who had recruited him from the Frontier Corps for specialized diplomatic work. Her face materialized in his memory, sharp features, calculating eyes, a smile that never reached them. "Halstead leads the Sentinels now," Naira said quietly. "She ordered my father's assassination after the Battle of Helios Gate. The official report called it enemy action." Trace felt sick as more memories returned, years of work alongside Kelthoran, diplomatic missions, tactical planning during the Scourge crisis, and finally, the discovery that had changed everything. "The Horizon Protocol's final phase begins in 3 days, Kelthoran's projection warned, his image flickering slightly. "They've developed a neural suppressant that can be dispersed through standard atmosphere processors. Once deployed, it will make both our species susceptible to direct neural programming." Trace sagged against the console. "Mass mind control. That's what they're planning. The key to stopping them lies in the Nexus core," the commander continued. "We separated the access codes between us. You have half embedded in your neural pattern, they couldn't erase it without killing you, which is why they chose suppression instead. I entrusted my half to Naira, encoded in her genetic signature." The hologram shifted, displaying a complex sequence of symbols and coordinates. "This will lead you to where we hid the countermeasure. A targeted EMP burst calibrated specifically to disable Sentinel technology without harming standard systems." The projection of Kelthoran seemed to look directly at Trace, despite being a pre-recorded message. "I'm sorry for what this revelation will cost you, old friend. The life they built for you may have been false, but the choices you make now are real." The hologram flickered one final time before dissolving into particles of light that faded into the ship's atmosphere. The cylinder powered down, leaving the chamber in relative darkness. Trace stood in silence, overwhelmed by the flood of recovered memories competing with the fabricated life he'd lived for the past 3 years. Both felt real, the skilled diplomatic officer and the cynical mechanic, both parts of him now. "Your father," he finally said, looking up at Naira. "He was a good man. Better than most of us deserved." Naira's expression softened. "He said the same about you. That's why I never believed the official story that you had betrayed us and fled." The ship's navigation system chimed softly, indicating they were approaching a jump point. "We need to decide our course," Naira said. "The coordinates from the cache point to the Kythera system, abandoned mining operations, minimal surveillance. If the countermeasure is there." "It's not just about finding it," Trace said, straightening as purpose replaced confusion. "We need allies. People who'll believe us over the Sentinels. Most of my father's loyalists were reassigned or eliminated after his death," Naira said grimly. "And your human military thinks you're a deserter with mental instability." Trace's lips curved into a grim smile as another memory surfaced. "Not everyone. There's a research outpost on Callisto Prime. Dr. Veena Lakshmi, she was developing countermeasures to neural tampering before the Sentinels shut down her funding. She might be able to verify what's been done to me, give us proof to take to others." "Can she be trusted?" Naira asked. "Veena hates authority almost as much as she loves proving people wrong," Trace replied. "If we tell her the Sentinels said she couldn't do something, she'll move planets to prove them wrong." The ship's control interface pulsed, awaiting input. Naira hesitated, then programmed the new coordinates. "Callisto Prime is heavily monitored," she warned. "We'll need to approach through the asteroid belt to avoid detection." "Good thing you've got a mechanic on board," Trace said, surprising himself with a confidence that felt both new and familiar. "I may have spent the last 3 years fixing junk, but apparently I used to know a thing or two about evading security systems." As the ship adjusted course, Trace returned to the viewing port. The stars seemed different now, no longer distant points of light, but places he might have visited, people he might have known. "What if we're wrong?" he asked quietly. "What if this is an elaborate trick? Your father's message could have been manipulated." Naira moved to stand beside him, her reflection joining his in the transparent surface. "Then we'll have made fools of ourselves," she said simply. "But if we're right and do nothing? Then billions of people, human and Veldari, lose their freedom," Trace finished. "Not much of a choice." "Choice is what defines us," she replied. "It's what they tried to take from you. What they want to take from everyone." Trace turned to face her, really seeing her now through the lens of recovered memories. The military bearing that reminded him of her father. The intelligence in her eyes. The subtle differences in how she carried herself compared to Kelthoran, more adaptive, less bound by tradition. "Your father once told me that you were his greatest hope for the future," Trace said, another memory surfacing. "That you understood what most of our leaders had forgotten. Species don't survive by clinging to old hatreds." Naira's expression softened with surprise. "He never said that to me." "He wouldn't have," Trace replied. "Veldari fathers aren't known for their emotional openness." "But he was proud of you." The ship's warning system interrupted them, a soft but insistent tone. "Patrol vessel approaching," the ship's AI announced. "Sentinel identification signature detected." "They found us already?" Trace asked, moving instinctively toward the tactical display. "Unlikely," Naira replied, joining him at the console. "Standard patrol route, but they'll detect us if we continue on this vector." The display showed a heavily armed cruiser cutting across their path toward Callisto Prime, its search patterns methodical and thorough. "We can't outrun them if they spot us," Naira said, "and we can't outgun them." Trace studied the patrol route, a familiar strategic calm settling over him as his training resurfaced. "We don't need to do either," he said, indicating a dense meteor cluster. "We hide there, let them pass, then slip behind them using their own engine signature as cover." Naira raised an eyebrow, impressed. A risky maneuver in that debris field. You said I was your father's advisor, Trace replied with a half-smile. Apparently I used to specialize in risky maneuvers. As Naira guided the ship toward the concealing cluster of space debris, Trace felt the strange duality of his existence settling into something new, neither fully the man he had been nor the one he had been forced to become. Something forged in the crucible of revelation and choice. Whatever awaited them at Callisto Prime, verification of their fears or exposure of a deception, he knew with sudden clarity that he couldn't return to the numbing comfort of ignorance. The stars beyond the viewport were no longer distant points of light but beacons of possibility, of worlds that might yet be saved if they moved quickly enough. 3 days, he murmured, watching the Sentinel cruiser's distant silhouette against the stars. 3 days to remember everything they made me forget and stop whatever they've set in motion. We'll find a way, Naira said with quiet certainty. My father believed in you. Now I'm beginning to understand why. The ship slipped silently into the shadow of a massive asteroid, engines powered down to minimal life support. In the artificial night that followed, Trace closed his eyes, allowing the fractured pieces of his past to continue their slow, painful reintegration, preparing for the fight that would determine the future of two civilizations caught in the web of the Horizon Protocol.